Hello book lovers, welcome to Uncommon Reader. I'm Daniela and today I'm joining the Women in Translation topic here on BookTube, inspired by Tracy Nordic Light, which did a wonderful video on Norwegian authors, and I will link that video in the info box. And I'm here to showcase 3 Italian authors that I admire a lot. So let's get started, starting with Natalia Ginzburg. You may have heard of her. And I have the Italian copy of Family Lexicon here. But first, I'm going to read a few notes about Natalia Ginzburg herself, which was not her real name. Her last name was Levi. In Italian, we pronounce it Levi, but I guess in English is Levi. And her work explored personal, family relationships, philosophy, and also a big part of her work was politics oriented, especially during the fascist years and the Second World War. She wrote novels, short stories, and essays for which she received several awards in Italy. Most of her works were also translated in English and published in United States and the UK, but I guess that she has been translated in several other languages. And just a little tip, sometimes if you use Goodreads, I don't know if you even need an account to go into their search box and put maybe the foreign title of the book you're looking for, and then you can look up in what other languages it's been translated. So I find that very useful. So back to Family Lexicon. This is a story of a Jewish family and the author's own family, actually. It's set in Turin during the 1930s and 1950s. Natalia, the youngest of the 5 Levi's children, is the narrating voice. With absolute respect for truth and in some ways maintaining the enchantment of childhood, the author not only retraces the events of her loved ones' lives, but also forever captures their language, which, as we know, is unique to each family unit. And by language, it means their mottos and their deeply rooted habits. So this is a story of an Italian family with its routines, the rituals, the crazes, the pet phrases, the stories, the doubts, the comical, the indispensable. This all comes to life in the pages of Family Lexicon. The father, Giuseppe Levi, is a scientist, is consumed by his work and mania for hiking. Giuseppe is Jewish, but he is married to Lydia, who is a Catholic. But both of them are actually not religious. They live in the industrial city of Turin, where as years pass, their children find ways of their own to medicine, marriage, literature, and politics. This is all very ordinary, except that the background to the story is Mussolini's Italy in its steady downward descent to race law and world war. The Levi's are, among other things, unshakable anti-fascist, of course, but that will complicate their lives. The book takes the shape of a novel, but everything is true in this novel. The author herself states in the beginning of the book, these are her words: "Every time that I have found myself inventing something in accordance with my old habits as a novelist, I have felt impelled at once to destroy it. The places, events, and people are all real." So I actually started this book as an audiobook, and I was really enjoying it because the actress that was narrating the story was able to interpret certain accents of different dialects in Italian regions. So I found it really, really enjoyable. But I haven't finished yet because I was realizing that with the audiobook, I was sort of sometimes not really focused on the book. And I don't know if it happens to you too. When I listen to audiobooks, sometimes my mind goes off and I think of other things. So I want to start this book again, but also while listening to the actress narrating it. So I'll probably be more focused on the book. So now we move on to Viola Ardone. And I'm so happy to introduce this current contemporary writer who is born in the 70s and has a degree in literature and worked in publishing for several years. So she wrote several publications and she teaches Latin and Italian in high schools. But she's best known for her 20th century trilogy. There are 3 books that include The Children's Train, Oliva, Denaro, and The Great Wonder. So these 3 books tell stories of growth and development through crucial events in the 20th century in Italy, exploring themes of humanity, justice, and personal recognition with engaging writing rooted in Italian history. So here are the 3 books, and 2 of them are translated in English. Starting with The Children's Train, which I dedicated a whole video, and I will link that, of course, for your reference. I also mentioned this book very recently in another video. All these 3 stories are based on real events, and so that makes them even more powerful, in my opinion. So this is a heartbreaking story of love, family, hope, and survival set in post-World War II. Though Mussolini and the fascists have been defeated, war has devastated Italy, especially in the south. 7-year-old Amerigo lives with his mother Antonietta in Naples, surviving on odd jobs and his wits like the rest of the poor in his neighborhood. But one day, Amerigo learns that a train will take him away from the rubble-filled streets of the city to spend the winter in a family in the north of Italy, where he will be safe and have warm clothes, food to eat, and go to school. And these trains were actually organized by the Communist Party at that time. Together with thousands of other southern children, Amerigo will cross the entire peninsula to a new life. Through his curious, innocent eyes, we see a nation rising from the ashes of war. As he comes to enjoy these new surroundings and the possibilities for a better future, Amerigo will be faced with a heartbreaking choice. So the reason why I wanted to dedicate a video to this particular book is that I am completely fascinated by books narrated with the voice of a child, because no matter the pain in the story, there is always a lightness to it. There's always like an open door to possibilities and a little bit of irony, a little bit of humor. So I really recommend this book. And by the way, I have my copy here. I forgot to show you, Il treno dei bambini. So the second book in the trilogy is also inspired by a true story. And I was so happy to see that this one too was translated in English. I didn't know before preparing this video. So Oliva Denaro, the title in English is The Unbreakable Heart of Oliva Denaro. This book tells the story of a 15-year-old growing up in the 60s in Sicily, where traditions dictates every aspect of a woman's life. Oliva values her freedom and resists the idea that becoming a woman means giving up her identity. When she refuses the advances of the baker's son, she finds herself at the center of a conflict with the cultural practices of fuitina. So fuitina, it's a Sicilian term that's pretty well known in Italy, because sometimes a couple that wanted to get married but maybe with the families not agreeing to the marriage, they would just simply take off and spend the night somewhere, and that means spend the night together. They had to resolve the conflict by getting married. So this also relates to kidnapping as well. So maybe women weren't really into getting married with a certain person, but after being kidnapped, they had to sort of submit to the marriage. So that was incredible, right? So there was actually a law that allowed abduction to be treated as elopement. So she refused actually to get married after being kidnapped by this guy. And her defiance becomes a powerful stand against a deeply patriarchal society. Based on a real case that changed Italian law, Oliva's story is one of courage, resistance, and transformation. It is a poignant coming-of-age novel about claiming one's voice in a world that tries to silence it. And actually, Oliva is the anagram for Viola, which was the character that inspired the author to write this book. The last book in the trilogy is The Great Wonder. I have my Italian copy here. And this has not been translated yet, but I assume since the first two of the trilogy were translated, I have high hopes that you will find this in English pretty soon. And just to be briefer with this book, it's a novel that concludes the trilogy, introducing the Basaglia law and the closure of mental asylums in Italy. The novel follows the story of a girl, Elba, and her relationship with the man who frees her psychiatrist, exploring the human needs for recognition and acceptance. A very touching story too. Okay, now of course I have to include my adored Oriana Fallaci. You might have heard me speak of her many times. So a little bio on Oriana Fallaci. Was born in Florence in 1929 and joined the anti-fascist resistance as a teenager during World War II. Her father, actually, as a political activist, influenced her early exposure to the brutality of war. She began her journalistic career in her teens, can you believe it? And became an internationally renowned war correspondent covering conflicts in Vietnam, the Middle East, South America, and more. In 1968, during the Tlatelolco massacre in Mexico, she was shot and severely beaten, and that experience deeply affected her views. They were already very extreme in a way. Fallaci gained fame for her bold interviews with global leaders. I remember a very famous one with Ayatollah Khomeini, and including a controversial 1972 interview with Henry Kissinger, who later called it his worst media experience. Yeah, I'm not surprised because she was quite unapologetic. In the 1970s, she had a relationship with Greek resistance fighter Alexander Panagoulis, whose life inspired the book A Man. We'll get to it later. And overall, she was known for her fiercely individualistic views, and she often clashed with feminists and literary critics alike. She had something to say about anybody, but her best-selling novels and journalistic works translated into 21 different languages and blur the lines between reportage and literature. So let's talk about a couple of her books, which I'm going to read soon. This is going to be a buddy read for my Italian channel, inshallah. She wrote this in 1990, and she returned to great novel with this book, which is a choral work inspired by the Western Peace Mission in Beirut after the bloody events of 1982. And this is considered to be like a little Iliad that Fallaci herself narrates by giving voice to one of the protagonists, the professor, a soldier passionate about literature. And here is what Oriana Fallaci herself says about the book. I can tell you that the story takes place over the course of 3 months, and that it opens with the dogs of Beirut, an allegory on the edges of the news, that it starts with the double massacre, that it follows the thread of a mathematical equation, and that to develop the plot, I use Ulysses Hamlet-like squire. Whoa, the one who searches for the formula of life. So between protagonists books, and extra, there are about 60 characters. But day by day, the cast grows, the stage becomes more crowded, and soon new ones will arrive. Inshallah, as God wills, is an act of love for life that rejects the ferocity of any war and places man at the center of his own destiny. A formidable opus which glimpses the battles of the future while analyzing and describing the spirit of Italians with a wisdom, an irony, and a detachment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to read this one later in the fall with another booktuber friend of mine, and I will talk about this book, of course, later on here on Uncommon Reader. So let's finish up with a man. I have Un Uomo, the Italian copy here with me. And again, we go back to Alexandros Panagoulis. So this is a quote from the book. What's the point anyway of suffering, dying? It teaches us to live, boy. A man who does not struggle does not live. He survives. What do you think about this quote? So the book is a pseudo-biography about Alexander Panagoulis, written in the form of a novel. Fallaci had an intense romantic relationship with Panagoulis. She uses the novel to put forth her view that Panagoulis was actually assassinated by a vast conspiracy, a view that was actually widely shared by many Greeks. And I will definitely read this one, I'm not sure next year, but definitely very soon. And all these books belong to my aunt, so they're very precious to me. And I think she was the one introducing me to Oriana Fallaci. And this concludes today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I did love this format, and I don't know if I should wait another August for sharing more Italian authors with you. Maybe not. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed and if you'd like to see more of this type of content here on the channel. Thank you for your support. The channel is growing, so I truly appreciate all the new and old subscribers. I'll see you next time. And in the meantime, happy reading. Ciao.